I'm Eric Lesh. I'm the Executive Director of Legal, the LGBT Bar Association of New York. We're so excited to have a great panel with us today to talk about resumes and how we can improve them through an LGBT lens and just broadly from some experts. We have some great student programming, and I'm really glad that students and young professionals are joining us today. I'm going to kick it off before I introduce Momentum Search Group and the experts that you're going to hear from today. I'm going to kick it off to our board president, Sarah Filcher, to just talk a little bit about our law student programming and to welcome you. Sarah?
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everyone to today's resume building workshop. For those of you who don't know me, I am a firm believer that it's never too early to get involved with the Bar Association. And I applaud our law students and young professionals who are here today doing just that. I am especially proud to be leading a bar association that is so supportive of law student members. And I wanted to just take a moment to reflect on some of the ways that we show our commitment to law students throughout the year. We have a mentor-mentee program that is incredibly robust. We host events like this, the workshop building program, and we have an upcoming program that's co-sponsored by a number of affinity bar associations, including the Hispanic National Bar Association on March 25th, 2021. And that is Managing Your Personal Brand. I'm told there's still a few seats available for that. So if you're interested in registering, now is the time. Additionally, we have the Hank Henry Judicial Fellowship to introduce law students who are particularly interested in one day pursuing the bench into what it's like to be an out judge serving across New York State. And finally, one of the most exciting initiatives that we've done recently, though it's hard to compete with that, is we are going to be expanding our commitment not only to law students, but pre-law students as well, introducing an LSAT scholarship fund later this year. So very exciting things going on in terms of our ongoing commitment to building and protecting the pipeline of LGBTQIA+ attorneys and judges. And with that, I don't want to take up too much of our time this afternoon, so I'll turn it over to our panelists.
Fantastic. And just quickly, in terms of housekeeping, we are recording this. So if you're searching for a job and you don't want your employer to maybe know about it, make sure that you just have that in mind. We're going to do Q&A at the end, so you can ask questions using the chat function. So that way you can remain anonymous if you like, or you can raise your hand. We'll use that function too, and the panelists will call on you. So let me kick it off to them. Momentum Search Group is a national legal recruiting agency based out of New York. They work alongside decision makers at elite law firms, boutique law firms, and companies ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies. We have Jason Schoenberg with us, Jenny Berk, Jodi Fleisher, and Andrew Merten, who are all going to talk to you a little bit about the resume building experience. I think, Jason, you're first up, yes?
Sorry. Yes, I'm first up. Welcome, everybody, and thanks for coming to discuss the exciting topic of resumes. When a potential employer decides whether they're going to grant you an interview, your resume is going to serve as your representative. It's your advocate. Your resume will brag about the most important and impressive things you have done up to this point of your life. It's going to tell the reader why they should meet you and how you compare to other applicants at first glance. For as many times as you may have put together a resume, few of you have probably been taught the specifics of resume writing. I'm sure you've looked up a resume, you've showed a family friend, you've consulted with a career department. But if you haven't spoken to individuals who routinely review resumes and hire, you may not have all the answers you need to craft a resume that really stands out. Many of you may have substance or style questions. You may also have a specific question about whether and how to put a particular item on your resume. Hopefully we'll be able to answer all these questions and leave you with concrete do's and don'ts to guide you. But if you leave today and something comes up and we haven't answered it, please feel free to reach out to any of us. We're really here to help. We encourage you to think of your resume as the holiday window display at Saks. Its purpose is not to show your entire collection, only a highly curated selection of your most appealing attributes and relevant experience. You want to capture the reader's attention and compel them to want to meet you and learn more. To highlight your accomplishments and what makes you interesting on a resume, you have to pick and choose. You may be proud that you were a camp counselor for 6 years, or that you read the entire Harry Potter collection, but those points are probably not going to make someone want to learn more about you. You need to highlight only the essential aspects, education and experience. and then include anything else that demonstrates unique value that you may add. You need to present this information clearly and concisely because the reader is probably not going to look at your resume for all that long. You don't want them to miss something important because something less important diverted their attention. All of you, though, should be encouraged to keep a running list of impressive things you've done in your lives, or even just qualities that make you interesting and unique. But save these as potential talking points to help a prospective employer get to know you better once your foot's through the door, once your resume gets you the interview. So let's go into the first two essential areas to highlight. Education. Highlight your educational successes, honors, GPA, scholarships, journals, moot court, etc. These should be bulleted and organized from most to least important. And again, it's okay to leave something out. Your reader doesn't need to know everything about you, just enough to want to learn more. Cluttering your resume with relevant bullet points not only distracts the reader, but it actually could be a red flag. It may tell the reader you have trouble identifying what's important, and that's an attribute that legal employers actually want you to have. The second area is experience. Highlight what you've done that's relevant to the position you're applying for. As a student, it's going to be less extensive than as a young associate, and that's expected, and it's okay. Don't add arbitrary content to compensate for this. You should include relevant job experiences, anything legal plus anything non-legal that still adds value. For example, include that internship with the hedge fund in the analytics department, but not that you were a dog walker, unless you built a successful dog walking business and put yourself through law school with it, because that would show drive and determination. Highlight the job and specific accomplishments, always organized from most to least important and from broad to specific. After those areas, education experience, it does get tricky. A general rule of thumb is ask yourself, what does this item say about me? Does this make me stand out? Will the reader of my resume care about this? If you ask yourself those three questions, you'll probably have an easier time deciding if something should really make it into your highlight reel, which is your resume. That's kind of where I'm going to go. I'm going to turn over to Jenny Berk to talk a little bit more about the substance portion of your resume.
Hi, everyone. Something Jason just said made me think about all the resumes that I've seen. And I think it is really hard to strike the balance of the right amount of information. It's sort of like the Goldilocks principle, right? Most people either send me 2-page resumes with way too much information, or they don't flesh it out enough. So I want to just unpack sort of the substance of the resume a little bit. First and foremost, a lot of people ask me which comes first, education or experience. I think Andy asked me that like his first day at Momentum. And I would say 9 times out of 10, especially for law students, obviously, but even for, young laterals, put education first. It's closest to what you've done. Listen, this is a living, breathing document, right? So if you've been practicing for 10 years, particularly if you're at a law firm that's very prestigious and maybe you went to a lower ranked law school, maybe you didn't have a lot of honors or your grades weren't great, maybe we put that at the bottom at that point. But I think otherwise, education should be first. Another question I get a lot is GPAs. Do you include GPAs on your resume? I see some no head shakers. So for laterals, I almost always take them off, candidly. I just don't think they're that useful, especially undergrad. Like, no one cares. But I think if you're a law student, and especially if you're at a school that provides GPAs and yours is really good, put it on there. If it's above a 3.5, especially if you're, I think like I went to NYU for law school, they don't do GPAs. So it's not an option. If you're at a school like that doesn't have GPAs, if they're in the top 10 or whatever, you probably don't need to include it. But include it if it's good and if we think it'll matter. Another thing to think about with that is if you did really well undergrad and not as well in law school, and you include your undergrad GPA and not your law school, it may raise a question, right? Like, why do I see it here and not somewhere else? So you may want to try to keep it uniform too, and do it either both or neither. So Jason mentioned including your most important educational achievements. So what are those? I mean, obviously Latin honors, if you were magna summa cum laude, including undergrad for sure, Phi Beta Kappa, anything like that. I would put it for both undergrad and law school. I always put, so if you're on a journal in law school or we're on a journal in law school, I always include journal as an honors. You know, a lot of times we do honors, list those activities, list those. Journal should always be an honor. I wasn't on law review at NYU, but I was on like the review of law and social change. So it wasn't really an honor, but it's still an honor. And firms view it that way. They like to see that you are on a journal. So I would keep it there. Any scholarship you got, I do think, like I've highlighted in the past, candidates who attended undergrad on, well, you know, they went to SUNY on a full ride or whatever it is. I think that that makes a difference. And for law school, obviously as well, you know, maybe you didn't go to Harvard, but maybe you went to X school on a full ride, and that can be important. And then any awards you've gotten. I know some schools, some law schools give awards after, you know, your first semester. At NYU, there was like the Robert McKay Scholars. So any awards you've gotten undergrad and law school. Diversity, I would include there, you know, member of this organization would be great to highlight. You can do that in a few different places. I think if you're like a member of your law students, like Black Law Students Association, something like that, right? You'd want to include it with schools. And then I also, I go back and forth about this a little bit, but say you're really focused on entertainment jobs. So if you're a member of like an entertainment-based club or were undergrad or in law school, I would include it. You know, if it's relevant, I would include it, even if it's not. Like, I had someone just give me a resume that included that he was in a wine club undergrad, which is like kind of interesting. Maybe we do that more as an interest, but it's not really necessary. It doesn't sort of add anything to your, you know, in terms of what law firms are looking for. I don't think it adds a lot if you're looking to save space. Another question that people ask me all the time is about if they transferred. If I'm a transfer student, you know, I want that JD to show up from the school that I transferred to, because it's usually a better school. But my biggest advice, or my most important advice there, is not to leave it off. You have to include it. And I think there are a couple of ways to do that. I frequently just add a line right under, so say, I mentioned NYU before, say it says NYU School of Law, and say I had transferred from Fordham, I would just add a line under NYU that said transferred from Fordham, right? Like, you don't have to make it a big deal. You also can. You can have it as a separate entry and list, you know, Fordham School of Law, and then underneath that put matriculated the times that you were there, fall 2020 to spring 2021, whatever it is. I also think it's good if you transfer to include honors that you got from the school you're transferring from. So if you were at Fordham and the law review there extended you an option to join them, right? Or you had a 4.0 GPA, I would include those things, because I think it's impressive, even if you were like on law review or were asked to join law review. So don't hide it. It's fine. You know, places understand that people transfer. It's not a ding, and we don't have to hide it. So that's education. Talking about experience, I think it's important to talk about what not to include. I think what to include is pretty obvious, right? We always want to have, let's talk for laterals. I almost always include the 1L summer still, because firms want to know what you did your 1L summer. Obviously 2L summer, and then your current firm if you are at a firm. I would take out anything pre-college, unless it's like hyper relevant or impressive. I had a friend in high school who worked for Senator Claire McCaskill, I'm from Missouri, for years, right? Maybe that's a cool thing to put on there because it's sort of relevant, and you wouldn't even need to put a description for it. You could just put, aide to Senator Claire McCaskill. Just the fact of it is enough, but that's sort of the only time I would include something pre-college. If you're a lateral, I would probably not include anything even pre-law school, unless it's really impressive in some way. And again, you don't need to describe it. If someone wants to ask you about it, they can see, oh, they did this, let me ask some follow-up questions. But for the most part, if you're a lateral, it's 1L summer, 2L summer, current firm. And that's pretty much it. Oh, another thing, actually, when we're talking about relevant, the best thing I think to include, if you are a lateral, the best pre-law school thing is if you were a paralegal. Firms love I think we might have one. Firms love former paralegals. No, they really do. I think it shows that you knew what you were getting yourself into and that you worked hard. So definitely include if you were a paralegal. And I would include a description for it too, even if it's very brief. I'm seeing what else to tell you. So one other tip on that is when I was saying if it's a prestigious job is if it's very relevant to the jobs you're applying for. So if we're focused on applying to roles in entertainment and you interned at NBC during your summers in college, put it on there, right? I think it shows an interest, and that's very important. You can also sneak jobs into the education section. So what I often do is if you were a research assistant for a professor, let's say in college or in law school, let's put that in education. It's a line, it's affiliated with the school. You don't need to waste a whole entry on something like that. I also think you could even put jobs in the interest section. So not interest, but so we're gonna talk about this a little bit more, but the last part where we include interests and bar admissions and languages, you can also group those all together and call it additional information or something like that. I usually do additional information. And in that case, you could say something like former aide to Senator McCaskill, right? You can sort of put things that show your personality in that bottom section if we don't want to spend a lot of time talking about them earlier. I know I mentioned 1L summer, but that's a big tip just because most of the resumes I get don't include it. And I ask people, what did you do your 1L summer? Especially if you intern for a judge or something else prestigious, I would definitely include it. So for the job descriptions, this might be more applicable to laterals, but if you want to look at that sort of lateral resume, I think it'll still translate. But I always describe the title. So I don't just put associate. If you're a law firm associate, I put litigation associate. I put mergers and acquisitions associate. And I think that just goes to what Jason was saying earlier. If someone picks up this resume, they're going to look at it for a minute. They're really, it's important to have all the information, especially during interviews. But if they look at it very quickly, I want them to know what you do. Okay, let me see exactly what they did. So I always include that. I also think, I know I mentioned this earlier, that sometimes the fact of something is enough. I think that's very true when it comes to clerkships for laterals. If you're a lateral and you clerked, just the fact that you clerked is enough. Everyone knows what you did. We all know what clerks do, or law firms all know what clerks do. So you don't need to spend a lot of time describing it. So sort of the format, I always think you start very high level. If you guys are looking at those samples in the law student example, let me just look. So it says client liaison for re-entry drug court for clients on federal probation. That is one sentence that tells me exactly what you did. right? And that should sort of be first. Here's a high level overview. If you're a lateral, represent banks and startup companies in mergers and acquisitions, period. So I think you start very high level and then you filter it down. So that's the first thing, is a summary. Then you list all your skills. And I think the best way to think about that is like, what is my role on this matter? But keep it general. So we don't need to know every single thing you did on each specific matter. This is the general. I draft X, Y, and Z documents. Here, you know, if you stuck me into a deal tomorrow or onto a litigation matter tomorrow, here's what I would do. I would draft these documents. I would run due diligence. And so it goes from summary to just your skills and role on something, and nothing in particular, something that could sort of apply no matter what. I also think it's important to, maybe this is a better way of thinking about it. It's saying assisted at trial. Let's take the paralegal example. Saying assisted at trial isn't really enough. How did you assist at trial, right? Did you draft or prepare exhibits? Did you second chair the trial? Whatever it is, think about exactly what you did and do that. More is always better when it comes to these, like the experience that we're focused on. And then, so I like to do after that. So we've got our summary, we've got all of our skills. Here's what I do when I'm a paralegal. I think it's good to have some specifics. So for laterals, you'll see on that resume, we bullet out representative transactions, right? So when I was a paralegal, I prepared exhibits, I second chair depositions, and then you could bullet out or just put sentences. What types of cases did you do that in, right? So you represented, I don't know, a drug kingpin in a RICO action. So a specific example of where those skills apply is sort of how I would think about it. A tip for lateral. So I also don't like to include like case names and stuff. I don't know if, I mean, you can, but I just think it's better to describe what the case was about. Another tip for laterals is, and I guess this sort of goes for law students too, to some extent, but I think pro bono and public interest is much more relevant for law students because you don't have as much to point to. If you're a lateral, I just had this happen to me. I don't need 4 paragraphs about your pro bono representations. Just a sentence is enough. Pro bono practice includes representing immigrants in family court and something else. You don't need to break that out as much. Another just tip is, you know, you want to include a lot of detail, but also keep it tight. So make it very direct. Fewer words is better. I'm going to give you an example that I'm going to read because I wrote it down. So if I say represent clients in white collar litigation, that's 6 words. Represent clients in white collar litigation versus assist in the representation of clients in connection with litigation involving white collar matters, right? Or white collar allegations. That's twice as long. We don't need all those words. The in connection with, the assisted, you don't need it. Very direct. Oh, I know Jason sort of mentioned this about keeping a list of accomplishments and things like that. I think it goes for experience, and especially once you start working, to have a running list of matters that you've worked on. I know it's hard. I know people are busy, but it helps so much if you ever want to leave to be able to look at and say, okay, here's what I've done. You can put your resume together in 5 minutes. I mean, so that's another good tip. So what else to include besides education and experience? Always include bar admissions. That's the thing I think laterals leave off the most, is bar admission. Always include bar admissions. Legal memberships and associations. So if you're a member of the LGBTQ Bar Association, great. And then any language skills are good to add. I would recommend, I don't think we did this on the one we sent you guys, but I would also recommend, if you are going to include language, to put your level, because I've heard some horror stories of people putting French and then the interviewer will start speaking to them in French. If you're not fluent, that's okay, but you can put proficient or conversant or whatever it is. You don't want anyone expecting you to like know legal words and be able to talk fluently if you can't speak fluently. And then, oh, here's another tip with that. I know you guys are going to think I'm being ridiculous, but I've seen this so many times where people include English as a language. A lot of times it's people whose first language was not English. And so I get it, but you don't need to include English. We assume that you speak English. I typically do not include an intersection. You'll notice that difference on the resume we sent. I typically don't include an intersection for laterals. Lateral interviews are different than OCI interviews. They're much more substantive and focused on your work. And I just find that most people's interests are cooking, travel, running, right? Like, okay, so everyone does those things. And I typically take them off, unless my exception from before. You're applying to entertainment jobs and a big interest of yours is filmmaking. You make movies on the side. Include something like that because it shows interest. For law students, I think it's important to have the intersection on there because there's less to talk about. They're also like trying to distinguish you more. It's sort of a conversation starter. And that's how I would think of it. Does this make people want to talk to me more? Is it appropriate? Of course, all those things. And Jodi's going to talk about this more, but I just mentioned running. There's a big difference between saying your interest is running and saying you ran 5 marathons last year, because that shows something about you, right? It shows your determination. It shows your hard work. I think it's also a conversation starter more than just, oh, I like to run around the block. You can also include volunteer work, pro bono work. I think on our example, it's the Boys and Girls Club. That's all great too. And I know I mentioned this before, and then I'm almost done. I know I mentioned this before, but you can also group this all together. So especially if you're trying to save space, you could make it a line, right? You could say admitted to practice in New York, fluent in Spanish, big brother, big sister, period. That's enough, really. I mean, and for law students, you could say interests include X, Y, and Z in a line, and you can sort of group it all together, or you can break it out like we did, depending on your style choice, which is a great lead-in to Jodi, who's going to tell you more about resume style.
I thank you, Jenny. Hi, everyone. I know that there are differences between what a law student resume will look like and a lateral resume will look like. Jenny hit on a lot of those points, but I think they're applicable. At the end of the day, the resume is a snapshot, right? It's a snapshot of who you are, and it's a roadmap for an interviewer. So when you're putting things on there, as well as the format of it, think about it that way. You want to guide your interviewer through the interview and what they're going to be asking you about. So when you think about a legal resume, it's formal. Lawyers are formal. So if you speak to friends and family members and they say, make it look bright and shiny and put some logo or pictures on it, no, do not do that. Look at our templates. That is the format that a legal resume should have. It shouldn't include an intro section or a summary of who you are. No, it should have education, experience, interest, the way that it is set up. So it is that snapshot. They know what to look at. That is what we see. And you know what? It's interesting. I just want to pick up on something Jenny said. Keep that running list. Obviously, you guys aren't there yet, but keep that running list once you start practicing of the interesting deals or the interesting cases that you've worked on, because when you go to do your resume, you have that information ready to go. You just plug it right in. And so, as far as like the style, those we put, if it's a corporate, the representative transactions, you put them, you bullet them right out. And that's that roadmap where it's really clear and concise for those people looking at it to know what's there, and you're guiding them what you want them to be talking about. And then again, on the litigation side, representative cases, same type of thing. I think it's really important to use fonts that are clear and professional. Again, legal resume. Everyone, the default is Times New Roman. You cannot go wrong with that. But I'm a big fan of Garamond and Georgia. They're two fonts that are pretty to look at, but still professional, and still sort of tighter, so you can fit more things on that, which goes to an important point, one page, especially as a law student, you should not have more than one page. I know you could have done really interesting things. Some people have careers before law school, and sometimes it should be on there, but you should have a one-page resume. Again, this is a snapshot. If someone wants to ask you more about something, they can, and you will guide them what you want them to ask about by just that one bullet point. Jenny, jump in there.
One thing, the only time I have made an exception to the one pager, and this is
publications.
Well, I was actually going to say, if someone is in like patent, if you're doing patent litigation, patent prosecution, and you had a prior career in the sciences, that's like the one time that I've pushed it over or included a lot about a prior career.
I agree, but as a law student, you shouldn't have that much to say on the prior career, that it should be more than one page, because you're applying for law jobs, and that's what's going to be important. And I mentioned the publications and the patent stuff in particular, because as a patent lawyer, your publications, your expertise will matter. And so sometimes we'll go on to that second page. But what if someone doesn't look at that second page? That first page really should be that snapshot. I think that's important. Margins, 1-inch margins all around, but there's flexibility on that. Like at the end of the day, you're going to create your resume in Word, but you're going to save it as a PDF before it goes out the door. Take a look at what it looks like, print it out, make sure that it looks good. And that goes like with the margins, you can always play around, but again, visually, if it doesn't look good to you, it's not going to look good to somebody else. And I think that goes with font size too. Like, use your judgment. You don't need everything on there. So at your stage of your career, you shouldn't have to go too small, but use your judgment. Going back to the font, it had me thinking about, I've worked with attorneys who are a little bit more artsy, and they create their own fonts in, Microsoft or Pages or other things. I have no idea. And while they look beautiful, not necessary. And I say that because when you're starting on your career now, it's okay, but you're going to enter the lateral market, and you're going to want to work with recruiters like this, and you're going to want us to edit them. So make that easy. Start it out now and make it easy. This is about efficiency, right? It's about highlighting yourself and being efficient and doing that well. So they don't care that you have a fancy artsy font that they've never seen before. That's not going to get you the job. It's going to be the experience. It's going to be the substantive experience in a clear, concise manner. I think that's really, really important. Let's see. I think that's it. I mean, it's pretty, standard. Legal resumes should have that formal, professional look. So now I'm going to bounce it back over to Jason or Andy, who are talking about the next part. And thanks so much for having us.
Thanks, Jody. So I'm just going to sort of wrap it up and talk briefly about whether you should feel comfortable identifying as LGBTQ on your resume, and then how to do so. And I just want to caveat everything I'm about to say with the disclaimer that obviously this is a very personal choice. So when I say you should, there's an asterisk next to that. If you do what makes you feel comfortable, but I'm going to say, a few things that we think, given sort of our vantage in the market and, what we see with successful applicants. So first, whether to identify, I think generally, and my colleagues do as well, is you should do so if you feel comfortable doing so. And this is sort of twofold. The first reason we say this is because in recent years, law firms and companies have really made a concrete push to diversify their ranks. And this isn't just sort of, a feel-good lip service to diversity. On the law firm side, this is largely client-driven. Company side, clients really want to see diversity in their outside counsel. So, there is an added financial incentive for law firms to bring on diverse attorneys, and that includes members of our community. So, that's sort of the first reason I would say you should self-identify. Frankly, it does give you an edge in the market. At the end of the day, law school and how you did, and, if you're lateraling, where you're lateraling from is all going to matter more. But, diversity can frankly only help. The other reason I, suggest identifying in the interview process and on your resume is, it's for you too. Interviewing is a two-way street, and you want to, make sure that you end up at a firm or a company where you feel comfortable. And while, most of us live in New York, most companies, definitely most firms are pretty progressive. It's not one size fits all. And I think you should feel entitled to ask about certain things in the interview process, whether that's LGBTQ outreach, like, sponsoring Legal, whether it's about, diversity among your colleagues, and also, more concrete things like parental leave policies or dress codes. I think all of this is fair game. So if you, self-identify during the interviewing process, I think you're going to be able to flesh that out a little more and end up at a place where, you're both comfortable and valued as a member of the community. In terms of how to do this, I think that there are a lot of ways to do it on your resume. The way we would recommend is, highlight, and this kind of goes back to, what Jenny was talking about, highlight activities or organizations that you belong to that at least, hint at the fact that you might be queer identifying. So, obviously most of you are a part of Legal's mentorship mentee program. Put that on there. If you're a law student, that could go under activities under law school. If you're a lateral, you could put it at the bottom under the additional information portion that Jenny spoke about. But definitely, put that on there. Again, outlaw organizations at your respective law school. Definitely, put that on there if you want to self-identify. What we really sort of advise is highlighting those activities and organizations and sort of letting your reader read between the lines. A recruiting coordinator at a law firm is going to see that and is going to notice that. And then you can sort of, drive the point home a little bit more during the interview process in asking the types of questions I spoke about earlier. Whether that's about diversity within the firm or pro bono initiatives that affect our community, or, parental leave policies, anything like that. And then finally, I do want to briefly touch on pronouns. Obviously, these are becoming a lot more common. I see quite a few here in your Zoom names. We are seeing most, if not all, internal recruiters at law firms add their pronouns to email signatures, regardless of gender identity. I think that you should feel comfortable doing so if it's important to you, because obviously it'll help avoid some unfortunate and awkward, misgendering during the interview process, or it could. And it could also, possibly highlight diversity as well. And, my colleagues may disagree on where to put this. I would suggest in the contact information under your name, because then it's just the most prominent and it's out of the way. Also, feel free to add it to your email signature, your LinkedIn profile. Again, this is just, becoming much more common. And I think we're going to see preferred pronouns everywhere, hopefully sooner rather than later. So I think with that, and let me just say, if anyone has any questions that they don't feel comfortable raising for the whole group, feel free to email me or one of us directly, after the program. But I think, we have a couple questions in the chat box. If anyone wants to jump in on those.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going through them.
I know, I didn't even, this is the first time I've used a chat
Anyone
bot.
can
I
jump
feel
in.
very old.
All right, sorry, I'm reading it to myself. I don't know why that would be helpful to anyone.
I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have
Oh, yeah.
a few-
Let's read them out loud. That's a good
Yes,
idea.
of course. I have a few questions I was hoping someone could address. I'm a 3L currently applying for jobs, some of which are with queer advocacy groups, but many that aren't. If a lot of my experience is with queer advocacy, should I be concerned about de-emphasizing that when I apply to non-queer jobs? I'm also curious on thoughts about the format for a publication section. I've never seen the same format on 2 resume examples, so what should be included? I've published in journal, solo, and as a big group project, so should those entries look different? Thanks again. Let me start with the public. Well, I'll start from the end and go back. On the publication section, you know, with all of these things, there's not 100% right answer, where there's general concepts of wanting to highlight the most important things. If you published an article in college, one article, then underneath your education, simply put publications and write the article and cite it. And any law students out there probably right now or know how to cite it even better than us. We usually have to look it up at this point, even though half of our team was published at one point, but that was a long time ago. If it's law school and you end up publishing an article, again, I would put publications, that article. If you publish outside of the education system, you've published for magazines, you've published on a variety of topics, that could also go under additional information. However, if you are very published, if you've published 5 articles, 6 articles, then feel free at the bottom of your resume to put a section, publications, and just list the titles and the citation. And these days, it might not be a book or a magazine, it might just be a URL. You know, you could do that even if you have, again, not just publications. If you have a podcast, I didn't even mention that, which feels weird considering what you're in, but everyone's got a podcast. If you have a podcast, if you have whatever, you have a blog that's on a relevant topic, put all these things. So again, it just has to do with how many things you have, and is it worth highlighting separately or not thrown in, but kind of thrown into another section. I'll let someone else jump in just because.
I was just going to say with that, I think that's all exactly right. And also think about how important it is also, right? Because I think when it's you yourself, you feel like everything you've done is important, which I understand. But maybe if you wrote some paper in college that was like, I don't know, totally not related at all, and published in like your sorority's bulletin or your, I don't know, whatever it is, right? Think about how important it is. If it's legal on a legal topic, yes. But beyond that, it may not be as important as you think. So I would just say, take a step back. I'll also quickly answer about, the queer advocacy groups. I don't think you should de-emphasize that at all. I mean, I just think it sort of doesn't matter almost where you worked, like your 1L summer or pre-law school or whatever. It's more about what you did there. And I think this goes to Andy's point earlier. If you have a lot of that on your resume and a firm for some reason is like, we're not interested in that work that you did, maybe it's not the right place for you to go. But no, I think I would keep the same resume for every job, for the most part.
So
Read the next one.
Let's move to another question. I already have such a full single page that I had to exclude my entire publication presentation history and more than half of my unpaid experiences, most of which were single lines and overly full 2-pager, and probably couldn't exercise more without detracting from that snapshot. How should I address this after my 1L summer? I'm just gonna hit my original point home. I want everyone here to know something. We represent partners who have been in lawyers for a decade, 2 decades, who have 7- and 8-figure books of business. Personally, and I've been in this business for 15 years, I will never send a 2-page resume anywhere with my name on it representing someone, unless it is that IP experience. And to be honest with you, and to go to a point earlier, like almost if the second page is more like representative transactions or IP experience, that's almost like a supplemental page to your resume. Your resume is still that snapshot. You got to pick and choose. And yes, you can mess around with the margins and do. And anyone who really needs help, feel free to send it to me. I feel like after all these years, most of us, give me 5 minutes, I'll turn it into a one-page resume. But it really does need to be that one page, and it's just about picking and choosing. And you can mess around. On the resume we sent you, like we have activities, each activity is a different line. Put them on the same line. Take out the word member, because guess what? Obviously, if you're putting it down, you're a member. Maybe just put if you were like a leadership position. There's so many ways of messing around. Just trust me on this. If the one thing you take from this is to send a one-page resume, and again, on that second page, if you really need to, just make it, even say supplemental information on the second page, like make it almost, you don't want someone to think you're so important in life that as a student or a junior associate, you should have 2 pages, when them as an employer, as a partner, as a GC at a company, has probably a one-page resume. So that would be my point on that.
I would also, the first thing I do if a resume is like a little over a page is I shrink the space in between entries. It's fine if that's like, you know, 4 or 5 points in between entries. I would also say, I mean, I know you mentioned unpaid jobs. I don't know if those were internships. I've seen some resumes that have all their experience out, and then they just have a section of internships and list them. Here's my internships, right? And I think that can help save some space too. I would also say if you're including things that are pre-college, take them out. Take them out. I mean, even if they're like, take them out if we need to save space. And also if they're in college, maybe you can fit them in that education section, right? Like summer internships, you know, 1 line in the college section. So there's a lot of ways to play around with it.
A lot of our questions are very similar. And I do want to emphasize that we just didn't say it. If you have specific questions, you can reach out to us. One of the last questions we had was, do you provide one-on-one consultation services? The answer is yes and no. We offer them, but we're not going to charge you for them. Reach out to us, because one day you're going to be at a firm and you're going to want to use a recruiter, and that's how we'll make our money on you, and that's perfectly fine. Or we won't, because part of our job is not just placing people into positions. Part of our job, and I'm pretty sure everyone here on our team and everyone not here on our team, we're passionate about this. I'm a big believer that they don't teach enough of career advice in college, in law school, pretty much ever. I was a litigator for 7 or 8 years. I don't think anyone ever gave me a piece of information or advice about how to manage my career. It is lacking, and it's a problem. And it's one of the most important things, because you're not going to start a job because you just want to give your entire life over to it. You're starting a job because it's a job, and you have a life outside of that. And figuring out what your life's going to look like has to do with managing your career. So I want you guys, everybody in here, to reach out to us. We will give that one-on-one, and we will really try to, you know, figure it out with you. Everyone's got a different circumstance, different things. Someone else, I'll just say this quick. I probably should have ended on that, but you know, someone else asked again about second career.
Can I jump in really?
Yeah,
I was going to answer that question really quick for the person who asked about a second career. I think there's a wide range of things you can do, but really you could put a sentence in that additional information section at the end. This is like one extreme end of the spectrum, and say former artist and union whatever. Honestly, like you don't need to really break it all out, or just have, you know, the next step would be just to have the jobs listed but no description. But I think you could say it for, you know, former artist and whatever. This is for legal jobs. That's what people care about. Someone else asked about a LinkedIn URL. We typically include like links to the person's profile at their firm in our submissions to firms. I don't know about, I feel like Jason may have an answer for LinkedIn. You should include your full address. So email, phone, and like mailing address also, yes.
Agreed. And when you're applying for a job, often, you know, like when we represent someone, right, we're sending an email, it's attaching your resume, it's attaching your transcript. And by the way, everyone should make sure they have a updated official transcript. Many jobs, almost all law firms want to see it. And that doesn't matter if you're 10 years out. They want to see it. It's like almost like, okay, they're not lying to me. They went to that law school. They're actually a lawyer. But I think that most of you will apply for a job by sending in an email attaching your materials, and or you're applying online, and there usually be an extra section. I think in that section, it's almost like the cover page, and I'm probably dating myself by saying cover page because that doesn't exist anymore really, but your email to someone for a job is kind of your cover page. And in that, I would include probably your LinkedIn, your LinkedIn link, because I feel like your URL, because I feel like that will allow them to just click on it. If they're sending a resume, not necessarily, depends on the format you're going to save it in, they might not be able to just click on it. But this is not a cover page seminar, but just a quick hint: when you're submitting your resume, if it's your transcript, in that email that you're sending to someone, keep it short. Don't reiterate the whole resume. They have the resume. They don't want to see it twice. Send it in a quick blurb. I'm applying to this job. This is, you know, I'm a 2L. I'm applying for this job. I'm interested in this. End it. Since I look forward to hearing from you, please let me know if I can provide any other information. Short and sweet. No one wants to go on and on and on. And that's a good note for us not to go on and on and on. So again, I really appreciate everyone coming today. Feel free to individually reach out to all of us, one of us. And we wish everyone all the luck with all your future jobs.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
That was fantastic. You guys were so good. I mean, it's your job, so it should be that good, but you're good at presenting it effectively. And I can't thank you guys enough for doing it. They have your, do they have your emails? Did we circulate?
Yeah, they're in the program materials.
Fantastic. I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate that. And like I said, we'll get as much mileage out of the video as we possibly can.
No, of course. And we, like if you can imagine, we're passionate about this because I like I said, no one taught me this stuff, and I don't think anybody taught any of us. And you know, the legal field is such a field where people are just unhappy generally in their jobs. And a lot of it has to do with no one ever gave them career advice. I hated being a litigator. And maybe I should have sat down and talked to someone about what that meant. Again, I think that's more for a more broader conversation. And whenever we're ready to do that, you know, that webinar, trust me, that'll be even more passionate as we try to convince everyone to drop out of law school.
I'm working momentum, everyone.
I feel the same way about networking. You've got to get out and build a network. If you don't build it, it doesn't matter what you did in school.
I almost jumped into that and then I just stopped because that's not the topic. But
that's part two.
Don't even know what that is anymore.
I know. Fantastic.
I was almost going to say, I see and I know that's not the reason, but you see all these people who aren't like actually present today, because I get the reason, like you're listening, you're taking care of your kids. That's different. But it's also this concept of just everyone is so disconnected. And we have to get back to that, you know.
100%.
A lot of people get jobs. So.
Yep. Well, I'm ready to throw a party, so you're all invited.
Yay! We're coming to Florida. We'll see you soon.
Okay.
Right. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Andy, fantastic work.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of course. I will see you later this evening.
Yep.